This is Speaking of Pets podcast, where we offer you up-to-date, science-based, accurate information.
Oh, Gizmo! Good kitty. You're such a good kitty.
And they're looking up and howling in unison.
If it affects pets, we'll talk about it. Today's Speaking of Pets podcast is sponsored by Blue Buffalo, the maker of natural pet foods. Love them like family, feed them like family. Blue Buffalo offers wholesome, meat-first recipes with high-quality natural ingredients in flavors dogs and cats love. Discover formulas for all breed sizes, life stages, and lifestyles. And with Blue Buffalo's True Blue Promise, that assures that real meat is the first ingredient, with no poultry byproducts, no corn, wheat, or soy, and no artificial flavors or preservatives. Hey everyone, welcome to Speaking of Pets. I'm Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroman, a board-certified veterinary allergist and dermatologist, and
I'm Janet Novotny-King. I am not a board-certified allergist and dermatologist. I'm your average pet owner, and I'm the doctor's sister, and I'm here to speak the voice of a pet owner and help pet owners take really good care of their loved ones.
Yay! Well, speaking of which, Janet, you probably are aware, as is everyone, of the rising cost of veterinary care for our pets. And the human-animal bond is so strong. We want the best for our pets, and it's so sad that people are even relinquishing their pets to shelters because they no longer can afford the veterinary costs. We are so lucky. We have someone here today, our special guest, that's actually doing something about that. And it's really my dream to do something about that. Even as a specialist, you know, I helped people out as much as we could. And I just think for an animal not to get care, it breaks not only the veterinarian's heart, but it breaks the pet owner's heart. Anyway, before I go off on a tangent on that, I want to welcome our guest, Dr. Anna van Heeckeren.
Welcome.
Thank you.
She's
and
a
Anna
doer.
is
Dr.
what?
Anna's a doer.
She
She
is,
gets
and we
done.
love doers.
We do.
Dr. Anna is a veterinarian with her Bachelor of Science from the University of Michigan in biology, then went on to get her master's in molecular genetics and her doctorate of veterinary medicine degree from the Ohio State University. Yes. She spent 15 years in cystic fibrosis research at Case Western Reserve University, and then in 2008 became the founder, president, and CEO of One Health organization. And this is where it's so exciting for me. One Health provides veterinary access to pet owners in Northeast Ohio for people that can't afford vet care or maybe need a little extra something to help with pet care. And I just can't wait to find out more about this. And by the way, at the end of the podcast on the Facebook page, we will have links that Dr. Anna has on her website, which is just a wealth of valuable information. So welcome, Dr. Anna. We can't wait to ask you all these questions.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. I was so excited when you came up to me at a Cleveland Academy of Veterinary Medicine continuing education event, and I just felt very special because you sought me out. So thank you so much.
You have a groupie.
Janet, I have to tell you, groupie, I have to tell you, Dr. Anna and I were at this bladder stone surgery dinner meeting.
I can say I was not there.
No, well, neither of the two of us, Dr. Anna or myself, do that. Right. But we always, you have such a desire to learn. And I see her at all these meetings, and we never really get to talk because we're always doing, learning stuff. So it's great to hook up with you again there.
Yeah, that location was pretty interesting because it was held in a restaurant. And so one of the walls had a glass door, and I'm thinking with all these, we're like, oh, cool. I'm sure people were like, oh, that's so gross because they're showing these surgical
on a big
procedures.
Screen.
No,
big screen.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's
yes. And so I am just like, I hope these people have some sort of blinders on so they're not seeing that. But for me, it was, I loved going to those continuing education events because when I'm listening to it as the founder of One Health organization is there something that I can take to a client, someone who's low income, and just have real conversations with them about, tough choices? And, people are going to make the decision they're going to make. We can't make that decision for them, but at least we can provide them with information. And then, it's up to them to make the decision because, as you know, it's the person who has the pet that's the decision maker. It's not the veterinarian. We're just there to guide the conversation, and hopefully they will make a decision that we think is the most humane.
I think you just brought up a good point because a lot of people are very judgmental and say we don't think that low-income people or homeless people should have pets, and yet that pet means everything to these people.
Absolutely. And, I do run into people like, I have to admit, I was one of those people at one point in time. I was thinking, logically, it makes sense. If you have a pet, you should be able to afford it. But the reality is people have pets and it fills an emotional need, a physical need, sometimes a psychological need. And so I rethought my thinking to say, I would rather see a pet in a loving home than in a shelter. And us veterinarians want to do everything for the animals. So sometimes I've heard my colleagues say that they would say, well, if you can't afford this kind of care, which is fixable, it's a fixable, but it's just expensive, take it to the shelter where they can do the surgery, they can do the procedure, and then you've created a homeless pet. And I thought that is just crazy. So I am so enthusiastic about these shelters that are incorporating community members into their work because they're recognizing they're part of that making a homeless pet. And so we just had a fabulous meeting over at the Cleveland APL. The board, we got together with the board and we got a tour of the brand new facility. So they revamped the existing, they expanded the veterinary services, and wow, we all wanted to take animals home. But I know my cat's like, you're not bringing another animal into my home. But anyway, so they're one of our partners that we work with, low-income pet owners, lots and lots of cats.
Oh, I bet.
Lots of
And
cats.
the care at the APL is wonderful. I know I've been through that. We had Alice and Dr. Lash on, and it is so impressive. I think Cleveland should be so proud of that facility.
Well, I was thinking the other thing is if that low income person gives up that pet, there's a risk it could end up in an abusive situation, the pet. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that doesn't happen, but I'm sure it does on occasion, because people at the shelters, their job is to make sure that those animals are back in homes. And, there's only so much you can do to screen people. I know that some shelters will have very strict regulations and they will say you must have a yard with a fence. And I've even heard some veterinarians being turned away by some of these shelters. So some of the thinking has been evolving to include, well, are we being too judgmental? So the Cleveland APL now has community services. So if you're low income and you can't afford standard services and you're a Cleveland resident, you can go to that location and get the care that your pet needs, which is phenomenal.
So walk our audience through this. So you have a pet, an owner who can't afford to have, I don't know, whatever surgery or fixed on their pet, corrected. So what happens next?
So a lot of times we'll have people contact us saying, hey, I need financial support. I need my pet to go to the veterinarian. And I wish we could do a little bit better of a job for those urgent situations, but we have to make sure that we have money in the bank to cover the voucher cards that we give them. They use it very much like a debit card, and they would just use that card to pay for the services. It can be used for whatever. We cap it at $250 per pet owner, and we provide other services besides that, but it really does limit what they can be offered. So sometimes having a radiograph, an x-ray, or an ultrasound, or a specialist, or an emergency procedure, those are kinds of things where that's where I'm thinking that has to be a tough conversation. And I'm not there to listen to the conversation. So when I see those invoices come in so that we can reimburse the veterinarians for their services, I say, oh, that must have been a really tough conversation because they decided not to do this vaccine and they chose to do this, or they chose, so some of the invoices will reflect what has been offered and what has been declined. So, again, I'm not in that room. I would love to be that fly on the wall just to hear those conversations and to be able to have better perspective on how to guide other people, other low income people. Also to give people a little bit of, I don't want to use the phrase reality check, but that's the only phrase that's coming to mind right now. But, sometimes you just have to inform people, this is how much it costs. And they really aren't out to, gouge anyone. It is the way that many veterinarians make a living. And you have to pay your staff, you have to pay for equipment replacements, you have to pay for all that stuff. So it is expensive. And I did hear a really fascinating conversation from, I forget his name, but he was high up in the AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, in the finance field. And he said that for 30 years, veterinarians were not increasing their prices
True.
to meet inflation.
True.
And
I'm one of those. That's
you're
true.
running a business.
Our prices 30 years. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Anna, do they call you to get these vouchers, or how does that work?
Yeah. So how do people find us? So we do have a lot of presence on social media. So we have 4 social media channels. We've got Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X, otherwise known as LinkedIn or Twitter. And so sometimes people find out about us that way when we have, like, hey, this is what we do. This is why we want people to get involved, that kind of thing. A lot of it is word of mouth from other people who've been served. A lot of times it's the veterinarians themselves that say, hey, contact One Health organization. So it's really, it used to be a struggle, but now it's snowballed. So we have a lot of people contacting us. And so we do find ourselves in situations where we have to say, we have to put you on a waiting list. I wish it wasn't the case, but you just have to be put on a waiting list. We just don't have all the resources.
Janet, my sister, is head of a nonprofit as well. And
oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so where do you get your funding? Is it independent companies that fund you, or donations?
Yeah. So we do get some grants. Primarily, those are big dollars restricted for the veterinary care expenses. But then we're operating a business too. So we need to run our operations, and we need to invest in fundraising. So we do spend money on fundraising. We do spend money on marketing. We do spend money on our IT support. But this is the way we help people, because all that we do is really, people call us, we'll get an email, we'll get a form filled out from our website. So there's lots of different ways people can reach us. So most of it for all that other expenses is from individual donors. So we have donors as low as, $5, and then we have some that can give more. And so, fundraising, Janet, I'm sure it's work. You have to ask people for money. Money is not falling from the sky, as a lot of people think. You do have to ask for the money.
Now, you partner, I know, with the Cleveland APL, but I'm sure you have other relationships in the community. Who are they, and what do you do with them?
Yeah, so most of our relationships are with veterinary clinics we call veterinary partners. Those are ones that have agreed to accept veterinary care voucher cards from our clients, our mutual clients. And we have, I think we've got 35, 40 right now across Northeast Ohio. So that's Cuyahoga County and the 6 contiguous counties. That's our footprint or paw print for our area of service for our charitable work.
Do you have volunteers that work with you?
We do have some volunteers. Before COVID, we did struggle with getting volunteers. We're more of an office setting. We're not you're going to play with puppies and kittens all day. We're not one of those. So we have more opportunities for like outreach, like people just getting involved on our social media, liking us, sharing our information, and writing a comment about, I thought this was really great information. I just wanted to put that out there. But like community events, we would love to do more of those, but we need volunteers. The staff really needs to be focused on getting money in the door, which, it sounds terrible, but we can't operate these programs without money, just like any nonprofit.
Well, there's a great resource called Volunteer Match. It's nationwide.
Yep, I am aware of that.
I get a lot of volunteers is AARP.
So the challenge with us and people who are of a certain age, I'll just put it that way, that they really have problems
Oh
using
yeah.
computers, and we are so heavily leaned into
Yeah.
technology that we do have a challenge with that. So for those events, if you want to be at a booth and provide information for people to come by, that's a perfect volunteer opportunity for those kind of people. But we need someone to arrange them and to be able to categorize, all right, so this one, we got this many people for this event, and then we need, wait, we need people, so we need someone to coordinate that. And, we really have to focus our attention on where we believe our focus needs to be most. Yeah.
With the
But yeah, thank you for the
Oh,
suggestions.
with the vouchers, I'm just curious, are there any restrictions put on those?
So the restrictions include the fact that they're capped at $250 a year for a household. So that's the monetary restriction. It's restricted to those people who live in that 7-county area. They must provide proof of income eligibility. And I believe that that's really important for our veterinarians to know that we are screening them. So if they're on Medicaid, if they have a SNAP card, food stamps, if they have SSA disability insurance, that kind of thing. That's the kind of documentation we look for to make sure, we're not going to be down their throat saying, all right, we need to see everything just like, so we rely on the government to help us identify people in financial need. So that's what we do. So in terms of using the vouchers, the only restriction is it must be used for dogs or cats, no other species. In fact, there was one person who had a hamster, had $190 some worth of care. The person who accepted the voucher card didn't realize that we didn't cover hamsters, and so now I have this not uncomfortable, but just now that you don't want those kind of conversations like, hey, yeah, we're not going to cover the hamster, and then the lady on the other side is like, oh, I didn't realize that I couldn't, so we don't really know what the story is. We meet people where they are and just say, all right, so don't accept it for hamsters. We are not opening it up to any other species right now. And they got a dental for this hamster. I'm like, I had never even heard of a dental for a hamster, but they got those constantly growing teeth, and the front teeth are pretty easy to deal with because they're front and center, but those little back ones, So I thought that was fascinating.
Well, who knows? Maybe you guys will expand to different species. I mean, you've got to start somewhere,
Well, and the most common animals are the dogs and the cats. And I just felt that our profession is getting more and more diluted by being asked to treat more and more species. So the Cleveland APL actually had a story where they took in 2 prairie dogs in Ohio. And I'm like, prairie dogs? We don't even have prairie dogs in Ohio. Well, they called the zoo, and the zoo said, well, no, we don't want them, but please, handle them with Kevlar gloves. You will need sturdy gloves with those guys. So
when I hear prairie dogs, what I think of is bubonic plague. Because in Texas, they have bubonic plague because of prairie dogs.
Yep.
So
really?
Yeah.
We have dengue fever happening here in the Northeast.
I saw that dengue fever. Yeah. Well, there was just a bubonic plague case in Colorado, and you get that from flea dirt. So,
ooh,
yeah.
Are there other organizations in the Cleveland metro area that kind of do similar work?
Yeah, there are a couple, but like all of us, we're pretty cash strapped. So there's one other organization that we will say, all right, if you can combine your funds with ours, with theirs, then maybe you could afford something that's a little bit pricier. But they have other restrictions, like they must be spayed or neutered, they must be vaccinated. And so their assumption is that people should afford for a spay and neuter and vaccines. And that's where I used to be thinking that we should only provide those because I knew those weren't being, well, actually it was just the vaccines and the parasite care and the wellness stuff. But then I realized we had to be less restrictive. With COVID, veterinarians were backlogged with spay-neuter surgeries, which is just, thinking about all the puppies and kittens that are being born that could have been prevented. We don't want these. I mean, they're lovely, they're adorable, but at the end of the day, someone has to take care of them. So that really became a problem. I said, okay, we have to open up to regular spay neuter and not just those infected uteruses, the pyometras.
Right, because in the long run, it's more expense if they're not spayed and neutered. Yeah, when they're young. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I was talking to one guy who he said, well, my dog is only a year and a half, and you and I both know that dogs and cats can be neutered pretty young these days, especially by surgeons who have expertise in it. We have what is it? Northeast Ohio, Pet Fix Northeast
Fix,
Ohio.
yeah.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, and they got backlogged. They were like months out to try to schedule, and
Wow.
yeah,
So
so
what
it's
about
crazy.
like the monthly drugs, like the heartworm medication, flea and
Flea and
tick?
tick.
Is that covered for these pet owners?
So we cover them as long as they're purchased through the veterinary clinics. So there's a lot of clinics that will have those online. We can't do the online just because we don't have that relationship with the drug companies. But if it's purchased through the vet clinic, that's where we have the relationship with the vet clinics.
So the 250, it's one family, 250 per year per pet, or say I have 3 dogs.
It's one voucher for $250. That's
per
it.
family. Got it.
Yes. And the reason why we do that is because we don't not necessarily want people to think, oh, great, I've got $250. I can get another pet. So we want to I would love to be able to provide more money, but we also, we're kind of thin too.
No, I get it.
So,
that makes sense. Makes sense.
So
and 250 could very well cover the basics.
Yes.
Vaccine,
Right.
heartworm test,
Yes.
monthly heartworm pill or the shot, whatever they want to do, and then flea and tick. Yeah.
So last year, we did 512, and I forgot to check today for this current year, but we probably exceeded that by like 50. So every year, our goal is to get to 1,000 households. But that also requires raising $250,000 just for the vouchers.
Yeah.
You two would.
That's a
You
lot of
two
donors.
would. Yeah.
Yes, it is a lot of donors. And then, on top of that, it's the administrative cost of just running a nonprofit. And as Janet probably is well aware, it's more complicated to run a nonprofit than a for-profit because we have to appeal to donors and volunteers and the board and the client,
You have
so
to have
it's
audited financials.
it's complicated.
There's a lot to it.
Right.
Hey, did you know that for dogs and cats that could benefit from a prescription diet, Blue Buffalo offers natural veterinary diets formulated by animal nutritionists and veterinarians for certain dietary needs like kidney support, weight management, gastrointestinal support, and my particular favorite, dermatology. They make a food allergic diet that's an alligator-based called NP or a hydrolyzed salmon-based for dogs and cats called HF. Contact your veterinarian about these prescription Blue Buffalo diets.
I'm curious, Dr. Anna, did something happen in your life that encouraged you to leave Case Western and go and establish this?
Yeah, so I'm so thankful you asked that question. So there was an event, a continuing education event that was put on by the AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, and I served on the American Veterinary Medical Foundation Board. And so they had an event in Hawaii, of all lovely places. I took my family down there. I'm sure that was a huge opportunity for vacation for most veterinarians who attended. And so, while my family was doing other things enjoying Hawaii, I attended a lecture by the president at that time who talked about One Health as a concept. Now, there were different names at that time. They didn't know where things would land. So they called it like One Medicine, but then they realized that physicians thought that was a no-no. So then they came up with One Health, and One Health is a concept. I wish I had come up with it, but it's a decades-old concept. It's the concept is we need healthy people, healthy animals, and a healthy environment, because the health of those three are, they're interconnected. And as veterinarians, we know that. We see that all the time. But the general public doesn't always think of that, because now we're mostly living in the city. We're not out in, the great green outdoors farming. There's fewer farmers out there and whatnot. So that's a very different perspective of what the interaction between human, animal, environmental health. So when he talked about it, I was just like, my mind was blown. And I said, I have got to figure out how to make this relevant at the local level, because, you hear about these things at the national level and you're like, why isn't it happening in my backyard? And I said, I can do that. I'll figure this out. Like, where's my niche? So the niche was trying to figure out which people we were going to help, what species we were going to help, what the main topic was. And so back in 2008, a lot of, not the best time to start a nonprofit, I'll tell you that much, but it really was about the fact that people were cutting down their budgets and saying vet care has to be one of them. And as a public health servant, veterinarians are public health servants, I was horrified, because if people aren't going to be paying for rabies vaccines, the incidence of rabies is going to go up, people not doing parasite control, then you've got the flea tick, all that. I don't need to tell you, Alice, all
Or
of
Janet.
that
Janet
stuff.
had Lyme disease, by the way. So
did you really?
And
Oh my
Bartonella.
goodness.
And Bartonella.
Ooh, oh,
But
lucky
I
you.
never saw the tick.
Ooh.
I never had a bite. I never.
But see, that goes to show the One Health concept,
Yep.
because animals can be sentinels for incoming or oncoming diseases in humans. It just totally makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep, absolutely.
So then, what was your first move
Yeah,
to
then how
start
did you
it?
start?
Yeah.
So I started by, I actually hired a career counselor, because I knew my husband was going to not feel comfortable with a decision without him being included. So the career coach that I chose said, I need to talk to your family members, because this change will impact your whole family. And that was the best decision I made, because I am not risk averse, but my husband is. And when you're starting a new, I'm actually an entrepreneur, which I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur, as a nonprofit, focused person. But, just having that counselor kind of helped me switch my frame of mind to understand what makes me, I forget what the phrase is, but the Myers-Briggs test. He had me do the Myers-Briggs test, which is a personality profile. And so my husband got tested, I got tested. I thought we were so much alike, but so I'm an ENTP, so extroverted, as you might tell, intuitive. That's just how I'm very intuitive with, okay, so this piece is going to be coming over here and putting them together. I love to solve problems. T was thinking. And I'm definitely so instead of the feeling part, I think before I feel, but I definitely feel. Don't get me wrong. But I'm logical first. That's why I thought, it's more logical not to have a pet if you can't afford it. So that's where the logic came in. But then the heart came in, and I said, no, that's a place of privilege to say that. And then the ENTP, the P is perceptive. So I'm very perceptive. And then my husband, on the other hand, introvert, what is it? Sensory sensitive. I can't remember exactly the thinking. We do have that in common, and that's actually what brought us together. Was that we just had this great intellectual conversation. We both were like, we don't care about how each other look. We're like, yeah, whatever. But it was really that intellectual connection. And then and J is judgment, but it's not judgmental. It just means that you like to finish things. And I love to go after the new shiny thing. And a nonprofit is definitely all about new shiny things. So I have to, you got to put the blinders on sometimes. But so I thought we were so alike. I'm like, okay, now I understand why sometimes we get into conflict.
Wow. Janet, she reminds me of if you and I got married, veterinarian and nonprofit, she's like our child.
Yes.
She's like our offspring.
I'm a little too old for that.
Let's go for it. Let's try it. Let's see if that sticks. Well, I don't know. What the hell? What's the worst thing that can
I'm
happen?
just curious. Wouldn't that test be more valuable before you married the person?
Well, I mean, he did try to warn me about other
Uh-huh.
things, but it had nothing to do with him necessarily. But that's for another discussion.
Makes me think of when you get married in the church, you have to go through that pre-Cana or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
we were married in the Episcopal Church, and we met with the old minister that married us. And I'll never forget, I looked at him and I said, we lived in a 900 square foot studio. Like, what's not to know about each other?
That's true.
Right? It was literally like this big. We had
Yeah.
books in the oven because we had nowhere else to put books. But, you know, I mean, like, think about it. And I had to sit through, like, I don't know, like 8 of those sessions. Yeah.
You know, Dr. Anna, I used to think that too. I used to think, well, you know, why do they have a pet? They're, you know, they're not responsible. But the reality is they do. So you can stay in that ivory tower and say, you shouldn't have a pet because you don't have the money, but they have them. So how does that help the pet? By us thinking that way and not just saying, let's do something and let's help this pet. So I really admire you for that, because it's reality. We've got to take care of these pets that these homeless people own, that mean everything to them, or not even homeless,
Yeah.
just people that
Well,
don't have
sometimes
a great income.
it's all that person has left.
I know,
Yep.
I know.
They may not have a
Yeah.
job. They may not have a home. They may not have a
And
car.
sometimes this is just a temporary
Right.
time in their life too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. Absolutely. And you know, there was one woman who came up to one of our booths that we had last year, 2 years ago, and she said, "Well, I don't think that, you know, pets are a luxury. People shouldn't have pets." And I said, "You know what? I would rather see a pet in a loving home than in a shelter." And she, that gave her pause. So just by having that conversation, I'm hoping that she's now rethinking and that her beliefs are evolving. I mean, that's what we do with new information, is we evolve our opinions and our beliefs just by learning and encountering people who might not have the same ideas or thoughts or upbringing. So, but you know, the other thing is, like, why do you have pets? That's the other way to ask, is why do you have pets?
Yeah. Who
Well,
allowed you to have a pet? You know, the New York
Right.
Times did a great article about this family coming. I think they were from Guatemala and crossing the Darien Gap. And it was a mom and dad, 2 kids, and their dog. And I thought, can you imagine
Mhm.
getting across that 60-mile Darien Gap with the dog, then getting into the United States, and then they ended up in New York City, they ended up in Hartford, Connecticut, and now they're in Texas somewhere. But I just thought that's how important that family's been, and that's probably all those kids have left, right?
Right. And especially for children, because they don't, you know, they're not adults. They need a non-judgmental living being that they can touch, they can bury their head in their fur, they can pet them, they can just be near them and not be judgmental, not criticize them, not shame them, you know, any of those things that can happen in everyday life. Just, you know, we might not be thinking about what we're saying, but the dogs and the cats are going to just love them, just the same.
And I think we see that in abused women that want to leave their abusive relationships, and they
Oh
want to take
my
a
gosh.
pet. And now, at least I know in Florida, in Lee County, they're very actively establishing a program where wherever that woman goes, that pet can go with her and those kids. Because a lot of times the pet is abused as punishment for the rest of the family, and that's just a horrible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was one of our board members started a nonprofit. It's unfortunately no longer running, but what they did was they provided temporary fosters for victims of domestic violence. And one of the reasons why I wanted her on our board was just to say, you know, we know this is a problem. And if there's a way that we can further support people who are in these situations. But she said the reason they started the nonprofit, horrific story. So there was a woman, so this lawyer deals with domestic violence victims, family law, that kind of thing. And she came in with a picture of her dog with the dog's ear cut off, which her abuser did to control her, to keep her in the house, because he said, if you leave, the head is next. And oh my gosh, that is horrible. But that's what, you know, domestic violence perpetrators, they have a warped sense of the need for control, you know, all that
Well,
stuff, but we don't
and
need
it's
to go
been
into
proven
that.
that
But
people that abuse pets they're spouse abusers as well. And if they're not now,
And
they will
and
be.
child.
Yeah. So sad.
Yeah. Yes. And one of the people that we serve is a domestic violence victim survivor. And I don't know if that's the right word to use, but she's been able to get through that, and her two boys need to have pets in their lives. So she's been a continual person who's come to us seeking financial support. And she used to have a well-paying job, but she's got health issues, having to deal with the psychological and the mental abuse that she had received, the physical. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to get to her. But she says, all right, so this dog had to be euthanized, whatever the story was, and she would get another pet because her boys really, really respond well to having a pet in the home. So her one son has severe PTSD. The other, I think, is on the spectrum. And they just need that fuzz and that love and, all of that stuff, all the stuff that we love having a pet for, but they need it more because they have those deep needs.
Now, Dr. Anna, I'm going to ask you the question that we ask every one of our guests. What is your
Yes.
pet or human peeve?
I had actually written my reply and I forgot where I put it. But no, I think the pet peeve really is the people who are convinced, and you can't change their minds about pets are a luxury. And it happens in the veterinary community. You'll hear veterinarians say that if you can't afford a pet, you shouldn't have one. Even some nonprofits will say that. But more and more people are understanding the benefits of having pets. So the benefits being, they can reduce your blood pressure, they can help calm you down.
They get you up and walking.
Exactly. Well, my cat, my cat, we call it Pearl o'clock. So Pearl will just come up on the bed and she'll like she'll paw my head, and I'm like, I am not ready to get up.
Yeah, but
so yeah, she's my little. Sometimes okay. I've been managing to fend her off sometimes, but yeah, no, it's So my pet peeve really is that mantra that if you can't afford it, you shouldn't have a pet. So that's my
and I think the people I've said it before, the people that feel that way just don't know the reality of it. They just don't know. So we're not supposed to do anything then for the they're not.
What's that phrase?
They're being judgmental and not being real.
What's that phrase? To walk in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't understand it. So I will tell you,
and
I do get exercise with our cats because we're the human servants. In, out, all day.
No,
all day.
And they caught 2 snakes yesterday, you told
One
me.
is a bigger snake, like this, longer, and then the other was a little baby one. And that baby one, I didn't clean it up, it's gone.
And I'm telling you, there's more than one little baby snake. The snake has not just one baby.
We're actually going to start, this sounds really bad, but we're going to start like a kill chart, because there's some days, no, I go outside. We have stone walls where I live everywhere, and they're chipmunk condominiums. And like every day I go outside and I'm like, okay, there's 2 of them out there. Okay. And today we got a bluebird, and yeah, it's a menagerie in my yard.
Well, I have to mention a PSA, public service announcement, on the Facebook page for this. People probably have seen it, but if you see a dead possum, please stop to make sure it's not a mama possum, because I was on my way to TJ Maxx and I'm going down Everett Road and there's a dead possum, and it looked like it had been there for a while. So I didn't stop. So I thought, oh, it's probably not because it's been there a while. It's been an hour. TJ came back. 12 little babies had crawled out. I was able to only find 2 live ones because everyone had run them over. And I put my flashers on, got the 2. They were this big, 3 inches, no hair, eyes closed, going like this. I carry a bunch of stuff in my car, so I put them in a box, drove over to Sandy's, who heads up Golden Treasures Rescue. I said, while I'm driving, I said, get me a number where I can take these so that, because they need to be fed. So then I said, you know what? You better come back with me because I got to open that pouch to make sure there's not more in there. So luckily, then I turned my flashers back on and stopped. And this guy in this big white pickup truck with the bar of lights stopped behind me so I wouldn't get hit, and put his flashers on. And I went and I looked, and There was no more in there. But so then we called literally 10 places. No one was taking anybody, or no one answered, or the number was out of our. So I did get back to the wild in Castalia, Ohio, which is near Sandusky. No questions asked, bring them right in. So I did, and it's a fabulous facility. But for those that live in Ohio, go on owra.org, Ohio Wildlife Rehab Association, and it gives a list of every county, phone numbers, and what they take: birds, mammals, whatever.
Well, we don't get involved in that stuff. We just, dogs, cats, they must live with
Yes.
live with someone, whether it's in their car, homeless, whatever. We have served homeless people. We have served some people who are couch surfing. They don't think of themselves as homeless,
But they
we
are.
get a lot of couch
Yeah.
surfers.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Anna,
Yeah.
thank you for the amazing
Oh,
work you do.
I love what you
Thank you
do.
so much.
I really
We
do.
appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Well, I would love to just let everybody know that if they want to
Yeah.
find out more, or if they need assistance, that they should go on our website, onehealth.org. So ONEHEALTH.org. Or you can, really, that's the best place to go to get all the information. But, follow us on social media. We're available on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X/Twitter. And then you can always talk to us, 216-920-3051, and leave a
Great.
message.
And we will have all that on our Facebook page
On social media.
at the end of the podcast. Plus, make sure you go on their website and read their success stories and blogs. Dr. Anna has so much informative knowledge on there that I've joined it. So I get all those infos, and it really is. It's a wonderful website, and it's a happy website because you can see the pets they've helped and the wonderful stories.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, it wasn't until I started going through therapy and everything like that, and I was just thinking about, okay, why do I behave the way I do? Why do I think the way I do? And it was like, I always knew it was 8 years old, and I'm like, what happened at 8 that caused me to have that epiphany that I wanted to be a veterinarian? And I just said, well, my dad was always away because he was a cardiothoracic surgeon, so always away. My mom was not as nurturing as some mothers are known to be, and I was like as the oldest daughter, as the oldest child, I was kind of the mom for the rest of the kids, and so it's like, well, I can't rely on the people around me. So animals, you can rely on animals.
Boy, that's
because they're
true.
kind of simple.
You were very mature at 8. Seriously, to think that. What, I'm 8 years old. What's in? Absolutely, that's true.
Did you grow up in Cleveland?
So, all right. So my story is interesting. So my parents are both European, and they met in Boston. They got married in Stockholm, where my mom was from. And they had me. So my dad went to Harvard, then Yale. And at Yale, that's when I was born in New Haven, Connecticut. So we were in the New Haven area. And then in the first grade, I was in Stockholm. And then second grade, we moved to Ohio. So I've lived most of my life in Ohio, but because of my parents' background, and they were involved, their childhoods were directly impacted by World War II. So I'm also a child of people who grew up in World War II. So that also impacted me. So it's like, all right, you got to rewind to what my parents went through, why they behaved the way they did and all that stuff. So, but that only came out in the last 5-10 years for me to put all that together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow.
Where
in Ohio did you grow up then?
So we first moved to Shaker Heights, and then to Gates Mills, and my mom bred horses there, and she had llamas, she had sheep, she had rabbits, lots of different kinds of birds. She had a goat because it came with the donkey for $1.
Well, that's a good deal.
If you can, it's such a steal. Yeah. Yeah, right. So, and then they would go on the lam, and the cops would know, all right, so who are the people who have the weird animals? So, my dad was like, I'm not taking this call. This is an animal call, Doris. This one's for you. So it was an interesting growing up.
Wow.
ducks, yeah, all
Fascinating.
kinds of stuff.
You should write a
Yeah.
book. Seriously.
Oh, I am going
You
to
should.
after I retire.
Yes.
Because it will be an emotional experience for me to go back into it, because therapy helped me. But now I'm like, okay, so if I resurface all of that again, it's going to bring things up again. So it's not going to be, I've started a chapter. Oh, and the other thing that I'll just share with you is actually, I could have been a baroness.
Oh.
Do tell.
Oh.
Yeah. So my father was born a baron. And so because I'm a US citizen, I cannot be called a baroness. But had I been a Dutch citizen and I kept my Dutch citizenship, then I could be a baroness.
I think you ought to just work that title.
I know people say that all the time, and I'm like, but it's just, I don't have, we have a family crest. I have a necklace with the family crest. I've got rings with the family crest, and my mom's, it's kind of
a tiara.
Yes, we can work on that.
Hook you up with that.
Janet has one. She usually wears it. I've got the title for the book, Almost Baroness.
No, the screw
What is
baroness.
it? What is
Almost Baroness.
Almost baroness.
That's what I said.
Almost baroness. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to call my book, I Got Here by Accident. Again, I'm revealing more than I usually do. I was in a near fatal car accident my last year of veterinary school. And so I landed doing these jobs because of that accident. I wouldn't have met my husband because I wouldn't have been in the Cleveland area. So it's like I'm a lucky, unlucky person. I've had a lot of trauma, different kinds of trauma. And, I would compartmentalize it like a lot of people, but then over time, you no longer can it no longer works.
Right.
So your brain is like, all right, now we have to process this.
What year did you graduate OSU? What year did you graduate vet school?
93. So Dr. Moore was there at the time. Of course, we knew him then as Rusty, but he goes by Rustin now as the dean. So I did know him, and I think he's phenomenal. Yeah. And I did listen to that podcast that you had with him. It was great.
He's great. I love Rusty. He's the best dean ever.
But he's on Facebook constantly.
Well, because he's writing a book, and each day on Facebook he puts a new chapter. Yeah. So this has been great. I can't wait till I see you again at our next Cleveland Academy meeting.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you learned some valuable information about making decisions about your pet's health.
And don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe on podcasts, because we love to have those likes. Thanks so much for listening.
That's actually really good.
Oh,
you could both go bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
How about woof woof?